Welcome to another session. I hope you are well. In today's session, I'm going to provide a slight antidote to the conversation that I had in the session I did previously. Now, for those who haven't seen it, I think it might be worth your time. In the session I covered previously, I spoke to the topic, how our fathers are failing us. And I went through a number of important observations about how men, by omission, but also by commission, are failing their sons and their daughters. At the core of everything shared was by failing to provide a purpose, our presence, by failing in our priestly duties as the teachers, but also failing in our provision and our protective roles, we are creating an experience for young people that will take 2 or 3 generations before it is cured, primarily because we are absent. And sometimes, though present, we're not being the men that we should be. Now, I hope in the session I covered that I didn't, certainly hope I didn't make it seem that there aren't good men in the communities. I believe that there are. We talk about the shortcomings because in many ways, all you need is 10% to cause a tipping point in society, and we've gone past that 10%. But in today's session, I'm going to be speaking to what I think is at the core of what women can do to secure, to find, to coexist with good men. There's something I often use if you've had the opportunity to listen to my other sessions. The word is value proposition or value exchange. What are you willing to give, or what are you willing to give up to get what you want? For many years, almost going on 50 plus years, we have told women that women are not expected and should not be expected to give up something of a lower nature to gain something of a higher nature. And as a result of this, we have found that most women in the dating marketplace or the relationship marketplace have a level of expectation which is not consistent with what the men across the table would like to receive. And what you then have is a scenario where the value exchange is not seen to be fair, it's not seen to be equal, and it's not even seen to be in good faith or peaceably. The result of which women are losing. Men have always been lone rangers, but it is very unusual for a woman to go through life, get to her 30s, and be unmarried, and be single, and be without any prospect of a significant, emotionally enriching, successful, loving, nurturing relationship. That is unusual, partly because people and the way we communicate and what brings us joy and peace and fulfillment can be found in relationships. And so if we do not have a profound or emotionally significant relationship, it begs the question, what is wrong? And what we are seeing is that women are suffering as a result of going into their 40s, unmarried and single, and some going into their 50s. Part of the reason for that is the lack of willingness to give something up, or to give something in order to gain something of a higher nature. Now, I am one of those who I believe that we should be interdependent as people. We should not be independent of each other. I strongly believe in relationships. I think most of the joy we will experience in life, happiness, peace, contentment, fulfillment, significance, will come from our relationships, especially those in our inner circle, loved ones, sometimes business associates, but most importantly, people. Every relationship, whatever the denomination, requires the giving up of something to get something of a higher nature. So in today's session, I'm going to talk about what women should be considering as worthy of giving up, worthy of sacrificing, bearing in mind that my definition of sacrifice is giving up something of a lower nature to gain something of a higher nature. In this particular instance, marriage, an emotionally significant, fulfilling, committed, loving, caring, dedicated relationship. I have talked about in my early sessions about intersexual dynamics and relationships and dating. I have mentioned the stages of a relationship, where you first begin with the introduction, and then conversation and communication. Then you move from the conversations and communication into hopefully some form of intimacy, ideally before sex. We do it the opposite, but it doesn't matter. We move from intimacy and sex to a place where we're starting to then look at ourselves as being in a relationship or in relationships. From relationships, we transition to something more important, which is commitment. Then we move to dedication, and finally we arrive in marriage. Now let me take you through each of the stages again, because I think they will form the basis of what I think you should give up, because at every stage, something has to give. Introduction, conversation and communication, intimacy and sex. You move from intimacy and sex to relationships, however you define that relationship, something just more than sex. Commitment, dedication, marriage. At every stage of that process, a woman has to give something up. Remember, sacrifice is giving up something of a lower nature to gain something of a higher nature. In order for a butterfly to come into its fullest expression of itself, it has to go through the stage of letting go as a caterpillar to become a butterfly. You die to your old self to be birthed into a fuller, more exploring, a more significant aspect to your nature. You're going to have to give something up. So right from the introduction, something has to give. The woman, you have to decide what has to give. During the conversation and communication, something has to be given. Once you move from conversation and communication to intimacy and sex, something has to give. You move from intimacy and affection to relationships, something has to give. You move from there to some form of commitment, something has to give. Dedication, a promise has to be made. Marriage, a vow has to be given as an exchange. What are you willing to give up to get to the final stage? And I'm going to use today's session as a form my argument around those stages, recognizing that as you move through the stages, you have to give up something. Now, I have talked about, and I begin today's session, I have mentioned previously the importance of what I call the 3 S's. What men want. And this is in the general. Obviously, every man is different. Sex, we want serenity and we want servitude. The first thing you have to give a man is you have to learn how and be willing to serve him differently. Sex, serenity, servitude. Number 1, serve him differently. At the end of those 3 S's is servitude. Servitude deals with the ability to serve. Now let me make it very clear as a distinction. The man in a relationship is a servant leader. But the woman must serve her man, just in the same way that she would serve her children. When we use the word servant, I think we, especially coming from someone such as myself, we confuse, and this is a wrong position in the West, we confuse servanthood with slavery. But most importantly, we associate slavery stupidly as though it pertains to one race. as though only one group of people have been slaves to another group of people, which is false. Now, I digress. No need to go into that. But at several stages in life, we've seen both those who are light-skinned, those who are dark-skinned, serve as servants and slaves to other people. The word I use as serve does not mean you're a slave. It simply means, it goes back to the greatest reference to how you can get whatever you want. So if you want to be the greatest, two disciples came to their master and said, we want to be the greatest in the kingdom. We want to be head above everyone else. We are 11 of us at the time, 12, but 11 of us will stay with you, but we want to be the greatest. And the master said to the servants, well, having been asked, how can we become the greatest? The master said, well, if you want to be the greatest, you have to be willing to be the servant. In other words, you have to be willing to serve the mission, serve the vision of the group, serve each other, understand the needs of each other, and bring your ingenuity, skills, abilities to solving and providing that opportunity to meet each other's needs. Said very differently, Zig Ziglar said that if you can help enough people get what they want, then you can have whatever you want. Now, in this definition, similar to the first, is you have to give something to get something. The first thing a woman has to do is to be willing to serve differently. I go through the 3 S's: sex, serenity, and servitude. Most women understand how to give sex. As a matter of fact, the idea of finding a virgin these days is a rare privilege. It's such an exception. Why? Because people are having sex from 12 years and 13 years. Now, I'm not making a moral position or value judgment. I'm just stating the fact. So sex cannot be used as a way of serving a man, especially if you're giving it to so many other men, and also recognizing the price for which you gave out such sex sometimes is far below what he paid. But by sex, I'm referring to understanding the man's needs and not rationing sex as most modern women do. Sex is used as a weapon in relationships by women, recognizing that men really, really, really need sex. Women want sex. Women need intimacy and affection. Men do not need intimacy and affection. They want it. Our core needs are different because biologically we are different. And to the one who needs, he or she is drawn to their need being met. And it's not unusual for women to, because they have the monopoly in sex, especially in a relationship, to use it as a club, to use it as a way of settling scores, punishing him, getting him to do things for you, using it as a trading vehicle, sometimes even using it as a way of emasculating him and even demasculating him. You have to learn how to serve him differently by serving his needs and recognizing that in a relationship, you were supposed to be the one who meets his needs. Now, the word sex on demand is used. I have used it. It doesn't mean that you don't have a say. It just simply means, obviously, that once in a month, a week, for a whole week in a month, you're going through your cycle. Obviously, you can't have sex on demand. But the point being that you're open to advances without him feeling ashamed. But also you have the right to turn down advances without actually him feeling shamed or it being emasculating. If he has to beg for something that should come natural, then it means that you're not serving him. And it might be better for you to open up the relationship and he can have that need met, because otherwise it's enslaving to have that much control and know you have, and you are the person who should satisfy that need and refuse to satisfy that need. Serenity is something that women should learn how to become well versed in. How do you create an environment where there is peace, there is love and kindness? He feels inspired, he feels motivated by your presence and by your kindness. How do you create a serene environment for him, both physically, but also in his head and in his mind? He goes out to the world, but he knows in his heart that there is a serene state that you have created to make him feel like the sacrifices he is making are worth it. And finally, servanthood. I should make it very clear, when I talk about servanthood, I'm not referring to cooking and cleaning. This is a huge misconception that most people have. A woman's function, a role. A woman is not defined by the function she plays or just the role she plays. A woman's ability to cook and clean doesn't make her a woman. That may be something that happened in the 1940s and pre the 1940s as a result of the roles we played in society by reason that we needed to survive and we needed security. Provision, protection, and the woman played the servant's role, primarily looking after the children and the home. We do not have that these days. But when I talk about servanthood, I'm talking about something greater. I'm talking about serving the vision, serving the mission, serving the value system that he and both of you have created. From a Christian perspective, and those of you who are Christians, there is a huge misconception, even within religion, that a woman's role is to serve and to be in the kitchen and to be on her knees and to be doing chores. That's all nonsense. It's completely wrong. Anyone who has studied the Bible or who has had any opportunity to study theology will understand what I'm going to make as a statement going forward. Now, consider the source and go and check and verify what I'm about to say yourself. Let me preface what I have to say. The Judeo-Christian values are built on what I call two foundation pillars. You have the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is the foundation and the New Testament is the fulfillment of the foundation. Christians combine both old and new in 66 books called the Bible. Those who call themselves Jews subscribe more to the books called the Torah or the Pentateuch, the books of Moses, part of the Old Testament. And not all of it, but part of the Old Testament. The Quran contains about 2/3 of it is technically the Old Testament. The reason I've connected all three is so I can explain something that is very important. Those who are believers in whatever religion, Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, make up, in terms of the population of the world, roughly about 65 to 70%. That number is increasing. Now, what that simply means that if you exceed 50.1%, you are in the majority. So for the majority of people in the world, those three religions make up most of what people believe. Specifically with reference to the words both of Moses and the Christian doctrine, there is no section in the Bible where a woman is told that her role is to be a servant in the kitchen and cooking. It doesn't appear. Now, I can happily put a wager to anyone who actually will refute what I have just said. As a matter of fact, what you find is that the leaders in the Bible who were very significant, they were the ones who were great cooks. The men did the cooking, not the women, the men. And references in the Bible are drawn to the men in the Bible. Now, I can give you several examples. Now, it doesn't mean women did not cook, but there is no part in the Bible from a Christian doctrine where a woman is said to be a servant because she cooks and cleans. So much so that if we go down to parts, give you a good example. Let me back up my statements. If we go to the books, the early books, Genesis and Exodus, but particularly let's start with Genesis. Now I'm starting from the beginning. We know of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Esau. Isaac had 2 sons. Isaac was about to die, and what did he do? He had a wife who he loved. Isaac asked his wife, Rebecca, to ask her son to go out and hunt and make him a game soup, food, in the perfect way he always made it, because he was about to die. And he said, I'm about to die. I'd like you to go make that game that you made for me, which is amazing. His wife was there. He did not send his wife. Men in those days cooked. You move fast forward, and I can go through. You can go from Abraham all the way to David, and you can move forward. But if we come down to Jesus, who is considered to be the pillar of everything in the Christian doctrine, Jesus was the one who cooked. He made fish after the resurrection. They found him cooking, making fish, and serving his disciples. Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. David was a servant. Wherever you look in the Old and the New Testament, recognizing that what I'm explaining appears in the Christian doctrine and also appears in the books that the Jews refer to as the Jewish Bible, but also refers and shows up in Islam. Women are not known to be women because they cook and clean. So when I refer to servants, I'm not saying cooking and cleaning. That is a way you show, perhaps a way of serving a man, but doesn't make you a servant just because you cook and clean. There are people who can do that for you. You can outsource all of that. Now, the first thing a woman has to give up, or understand that she would have to give, is to serve a man differently. Sex, serenity, and servanthood. Now, number 2 is geography. Geography. I refer to this for a number of reasons. I have met people, young, attractive, intelligent women, who I have been puzzled at how they could still be unmarried and single. People I know, people who I wish all the happiness in the world, people who deserve to be in emotionally significant, profound relationships. And I'll use one person that I know as an avatar. And I hope it doesn't evoke any emotional responses. What I'm sharing is not something I haven't said face to face. We have raised in the West women to think that a man is not deserving of any sacrifice. As a matter of fact, we have raised women to believe that they can bolt on a man at any time that they choose. Go out into the world, get your education, pursue your career, pursue your profession, chase all your dreams. Don't worry about men. When you are ready, you can walk into the supermarket of men and just choose the best man that you want. And the man who can fit all of your pre-existing, designed, specific lifestyle. And he would just fit in nicely. It's like choosing a handbag. Geography is something women do not understand the importance of sacrificing. I have met women who live in Scotland. I have met women who live in Wales. I have met women who live in England. And I've also met women who live in London, England, who have met great men who live outside of where they reside, but who will not give up where they reside and have given up the relationships because they're not willing to go where the men are and start a life with him or nest with him or try to make the relationship work. All of these women, without exception, expect the man to leave his Garden of Eden and journey to wherever she is and nest with her there and find a way to provide for both of them there. You give up your provision and your ability to protect, and you go to her to provide her with your presence. So many times I've seen some of these women, one in particular, go from relationship to relationship, break up the relationship because she's not willing to move. Now, for those of you who perhaps have not lived in London, or perhaps who do reside in London, London can be very, very attractive because you have so much going on. Like most major cities, it can also be an anchor holding you back from happiness and love. Why? Because there is so much more about life that takes place outside of a big city. Yes, it gives you access to more people, so on a balance of probabilities, if you are in London, the probability of having access to more available, suitable potential companions is higher. But if you've met someone who you say has, and in my words, and in my using my terms, is a complete man. He has the right manhood value, the right character value. He has the right economic intrinsic value. He has the right non-sexual marketplace value, the right reproductive fertility value, and the right sexual marketplace value. A man who meets all of the standards, including having the gentleman's value, is one that you should be willing to give something up. One of those things would be your geography, where you are. In the West, we've raised women to think that it's unnatural for a woman to move from where she is, to leave where she is and go to where her husband or potential husband will be. It's not working. So much so that women are so entitled in believing that men have to come to them. Now, I should have said something at the start as part of my preface. One of the things to keep in mind is there are two marketplaces that exist with regards to relationships. One is dating and the other is relationships or marriage. Men pay a higher penalty with regards to marriage if it goes wrong. Women pay a higher penalty with regards to reproduction if it goes wrong. As such, both parties play a gatekeeping role. The one with the higher liability, therefore, becomes a gatekeeper and underguards and protects what they are keeping. In the dating marketplace, the woman is the gatekeeper to her body, her emotions, and her womb. A woman decides when sex takes place. She decides when intimacy and sex take place. She decides when she gives her womb up for reproduction. A woman pays a heavy penalty and the highest penalty for reproduction compared to a man. Therefore, she's more selective. So in the dating marketplace, women have what I call the leverage or the balance of power, because they are the ones who are choosing men, and rightly so. When it comes to marriage and relationships, men, we are the ones who decide who we propose to, who we give our last names to, who we go on one knees, both knees, or no knees, but who we invite to join us. At the point we make that decision, once it's legalized or formal, we're effectively saying, according to the data in the UK, in 9 out of 10 times, if there is a child, he would only have 10% custody at best. He would lose 50% of his wealth. He would most likely lose the family home. In the event he goes to the family courts, he's significantly disadvantaged. In 7.5 out of 10, she would initiate the divorce. In the remaining 2.5 to 3 out of 10, half of that, she asked him for a divorce filing. So in 8.5 out of 10, or 85% of the time, the woman will file for divorce. The average length of the marriage will be about between 5 and 7 years. So all of these disadvantages and burdens will be the man's to keep if he chooses to marry. Hence, he's a gatekeeper to relationships, and therefore he chooses carefully who he invites to join him in that position. Therefore, giving up geography, or geography as a thing to sacrifice, is a price the woman has to pay. And I have seen men who have left their family, their Garden of Eden, their place of provision, and journeyed to where the women are. And in almost every instance, the man starts to play the subservient role. He starts to play the more feminine role. He is around her and her family, very, very unusual. As though he's leaving his father to go join another man under another man's authority, while not recognizing that he is actually the man and should be the place of authority. And in every instance I have seen, what you see is an imbalance, where the man is playing maybe not just the feminine role, but that he's not necessarily the foundation. He's not on the garden or supporting the entire family. Why? He has left his place of provision. You take a fish out of water and you place a fish on land, it struggles and it dies. You take a bird and you put the bird in the water, it struggles and it dies. You take a man away from his place of Eden, or his garden, or his provision, or his geography, then he has to struggle in a different location to make ends meet, and therefore he loses firstly his purpose, because he's left what he should be doing. He's left his assignment. He loses a sense of importance and significance, because that comes from his work, and therefore he's playing a role that he shouldn't be in. So women, you have to be willing to give up geography. And that simply means when you meet a man who you've pre-qualified, and you say he's loving, and he is kind, and he is courteous, and he is a gentleman, and he's of good character, and he understands his purpose and mission, and therefore you feel safe around him, and he's also marriage-minded and wants to start a family, and he loves you and has promised to be there for you. You have to be willing to let go of where you are and go and cleave to wherever he is. Relationships are risks. Women are looking for guarantees. There are no guarantees in life, especially where there is freedom. Will the relationship fail? Maybe. Will it succeed? Who knows? However, sacrifice is giving up something of a lower nature to gain something of a higher nature. So we've gone through the first two. You must be willing to serve differently. You must be willing to give up your geography or your location. Sometimes your home. Let me say this. An advice I give young women, and I know the temptation. The temptation is strong. Women are doing very well. Anyone who is into property investing and anyone who is into even property management will tell you that when it comes to buying and selling, majority of the purchases on an individual basis are done by women of late. Yes, there are male investors who buy more in quantity because they have access to funds. But if you just go down and you look at individuals, you're finding when a woman gets to 30, 35, compared to a man who gets to 30 or 35, women are doing much, much better at saving and investing. And it's a natural experience for a woman to buy her first home, something I recommend that they do not do. Why? You're rooting yourself into a soil. It becomes harder for a man to come into that space. Most who do fall into the category that I call beta males, feminine men, or men who do not know the masculine frame. And there are exceptions, of course. By starting early and actually finding a place, you're nesting without the presence of a man. A home is a home is a home. A house is a house is a house. But psychologically, when a woman buys a house and starts to furnish the house into a home, something happens. Where the heart is, that's where the treasure will be also. She starts to nest. If she meets another man and and he meets all of her requirements, and he's a great guy, it becomes very hard for her to let go of what she's put her mind, body, soul into. Even women who I know who are happy to move find it hard to let go because they cannot afford either to sell or to rent what they used to call a home. So I recommend to women, generally speaking, you should invest, absolutely. But your first investment should not be your home. It should be an investment property because you want to stay flexible and mobile. Let me give you a good example, and this is a very true statement. Anybody who visited any of the places I lived in previously will tell you that in all of my places, from age 23 upwards, even when I was a bachelor, if you walked into my house, you found everything was painted white and very minimally furnished. You did not have paintings and artwork and all of that on the walls. Why? Subconsciously, I did not want to create a house whereby the woman would have been moving into, if she came along, into a completed house where it didn't feel like home to her. I wanted a case where it was a blank canvas. So I always knew if I met someone, I would like us to create this into our home, not you moving into my home. I heard of someone many years ago, of a woman who had been married for a number of years. It's a very wealthy man. And one day she just got up and she left. And when she was asked why she left, she said, I met him and he was incredibly wealthy. I mean, he lived in a pristine location. We're talking about parts of London that is, beloved, put it that way. His house was full with exquisite furnishing and furniture, artwork and everything, expensive stuff. And when she started dating him, when she walked into the house, everything was set. He was so perfectly happy with the current setup that it felt like a showroom. She wasn't allowed to put a photograph of her and her loved ones and family. She wasn't allowed to make changes. So she said she grew to hate the home, that it became like a cancer to her because there was nothing there that actually had her spirit or her presence other than her physical manifestation of herself. But she hated the place, and so over years she grew to hate the house and therefore hate her husband. Why? He never really allowed her in. It was all about him. Either way you look at this, both for men and for women, it's important to understand that relationships are supposed to be about the we, not the I. So I would encourage that women to recognize that with regards to geography, be careful about what you do. It might be an investment, put into properties and rent, so that when you meet someone, you're flexible, you're nimble, you're ready to go. And number 3 is religion. Religion. Now this is not so much of a big issue in the West particularly. In the rest of the country, or the rest of the world rather, it is a big issue. If 60 to 70% of people believe in a religion, it means that when we meet each other, we will have a difference in our belief system. And if we have a difference in our belief system, depending on what we believe, you might find there are strong oppositions in our belief systems. Something has to give. And I do think the woman has to give up her religion for the man's. It's not a 50-50 thing. I have seen men who, and this is, again, I say this simply not as a way of criticizing men, but men who give up their religion and who give up their geography, all things remaining equal, are normally subservient in the relationship. The balance of power is on the woman, and the men play a more of a feminine role. And the women grow to resent the men after a while, because it's not in a woman's nature to do the heavy lifting for a long period of time. Women cannot love and nurture and provide for a man for long periods of time. They can do it for a short period of time for him to take over. But a woman is a receiver, not a giver. A woman gives to her children and her offspring because they are hers. A woman dies, malfunctions, whenever she's given to a man, even though the man might be her husband, but the man is not hers. Women do not give in perpetuity and remain respectful, faithful, committed, admiring, and all the rest. Woman malfunctions. And so religion is an important part. You meet a man and he's Muslim and you are Christian. One of you is going to have to convert. Now, I have seen areas where both parties try to merge both worlds. Never ends well. If you do not want to have kids, that's fine. You can find a compromise. The moment children start to come through, you have a problem. I do think you also have a problem if you do not want to have kids. Why? What is the vision? You see, the philosophy and the principles that drive the family are important because they will determine the belief system. The belief system will determine, in many ways, what we consider to be moral. Morality, which will determine the character, which is a product of a hierarchy of values. Your philosophy, your belief system, or your religion will determine what you consider to be a hierarchy of your value system. And that will determine your ethics, which will determine the actions you take. So, religion matters. Yes, there is an overlap between religions, yes. But around the edges, at the margins, there are huge differences. In some religions, there are behaviors that are expected, rituals, routines, mannerisms, actions. In other religions, they might be different. Perhaps to wash your hands at a certain time of the day, or to say certain prayers at a certain time of the day. It's important to understand that a woman has to be willing. I didn't say she has to give it. She can make a choice. She's a full adult. However, if men pay the higher penalty and we are gatekeepers to relationship, then in many ways, the man gets to choose. He does not get to give up. When we're dating and when we want sex, we as men have to change and give women what they want. The woman can say, listen, I want a man who actually has X amount in his bank account and has a great job and can provide for me and is good looking and dresses well. We as men have to change if we want sex. On the other hand, in the relationship marketplace, when women say they want relationships or they want to be married, the man gets to choose. He will say, and he should say, well, I'm a Muslim. You want to marry me, you have to convert to Islam. He might say, I'm a Christian, and I'm indifferent. But he gets to choose. He might say, well, in Judaism, we do it the opposite way, and that's okay. He gets to choose. You get to sacrifice something of a lower nature to get something of a higher nature. And the most important part of everything I've shared is that you have to do so in good faith, and you have to do so peaceably, and you have to do so from a place of acceptance. Not feeling that you've lost something and you continue to bring it up as the relationship progresses. Number 5 is reproduction. Reproduction. In the West, in the UK, 1 seems to be the number that most women use. When you meet women, it's usually 0 or 1, but 1 is the number given for those who want to have children. How many kids would you like to have? The woman simply says, I'm only going to have 1. Now, let me take a step back and let's replay what I just said, because I think it's very important. You meet a couple who are dating, sometimes potentially going towards engaged, or are already engaged, or sometimes are married, recently married. And the question is asked, would you guys have any kids? And the woman is the one who usually responds and says, that's the key part of why I restated my statement. She says, I am only going to have 1. Not we. Now, I understand that the woman pays the heavy penalty of reproduction. She carries the child. But, irrespective of your belief system or your religious background, that question should be a unified we. Primarily because she carries his seed. And if he wants to have 3 and she wants to have 1, there's a mismatch. which is why most people should find people that they're equally yoked with. At the very early stage, initial stage, introduction, communication and conversation, how many kids would you like to have? He should be asking the question. Or he should be stating, I'd like to have a family. I'd like to have about 3 kids or 4 kids, if I can. Minimum 2, ideally. How many kids would you like to have? Now she can say, I do not want to have more than 1. And at that point in time, the conversation should end. The date for that particular experience should end. Why? You're not equally yoked. She wants something very different. And if she's forced to carry more than 1, she'll resent you. It'll be a horrible experience. You have to plead and beg for her to bring your loins to the next generation. A woman has to give up reproduction or the number of kids in order to have what she wants. And that means coming to peace and acceptance that he might want more than 1. Now, I don't recommend 1 child. I think it creates, if you can, obviously sometimes it's hard, if you can, 2 as a minimum. It causes so much issues with children. I'll probably have to do a session on that differently. But a woman must be willing to think about the reproduction and recognize that while she is the one who carries the heavy burden and has to nurture and raise the children, it is important to understand the highest honor you give a man is to bring to the next generation his offsprings. You might have to compromise, and that compromise has to come from a place of agreement, from a place of knowing, from a place of peace. Number 6, culture and tradition. Culture and tradition. We've become so integrated as a world. We're intermarrying, but I like to use immigration as a useful way to explain this concept. In the UK, something that you see on the news every day is immigration. And let's put aside immigration as the benefits and the demerits and all of that. In other things such as immigration or relationship to work, those who join, those who come to our island, those who journey across, legally or illegally, need to go through 4 stages. 3 are the core. The 4th is optional. Education, integration, assimilation. Education, integration, assimilation. The 4th is intermarriage. That is optional. Education, integration, assimilation. Why? You educate yourself about the people you're going to meet and whose land you're looking to be on and whose provision, whether by welfare or otherwise, in this case a relationship, a man's protection, whose protection you want. You assimilate yourself into his culture. Why? By studying, learning, and recognizing that you're looking to be his helpmeet. The 2 are becoming one flesh, and therefore you should be able to be a manifestation of him in his absence, just as he will be of you in your absence. A woman should be a spitting image of her man, just in the same way a man should be a spitting representation of his woman. You walk down the road and speak. We talk about the Proverbs woman, Proverbs 30, or 31 woman, and she's a spitting image of the husband, just in the same way he makes her proud. The reason I reference this is just simply to make it clear that we have lost a sense of the importance of assimilation. You can see 2 people get married from 2 cultures. One is Romanian and the other is English. The woman who is English has no knowledge of the Romanian culture and the traditions and the heritage and the history. Now, while she might be Anglo-Saxon, she's joining a new family. The person who joins is the one who sacrifices and assimilates, integrates, and educates herself. Women are the ones who join into a man's union. Men are the gatekeepers. So the person who comes and advances and says, I'd like to be in your kingdom, is the one who has to sacrifice. Now, I'm not saying you throw away your culture and your traditions. I'm saying you submit to his culture and tradition, because they become the foundation upon which you will transmit to his loins and to his generations his culture and religion. Very important. The first teacher in the family is the man. He should be teaching his culture, his traditions, his purpose, his vision, his mission, his value system. The woman, therefore, should be passing on the value system of the head of the family, which is the man, not her father's tradition, because she has left that family and joined onto his family. Now, it doesn't mean that she cannot share what used to be her traditions. I think that's very important because the children contain 50 of the chromosomes of both parents. But in a man's house, a man's word should be law, not another man, except he chooses those words. Therefore, what he teaches should be what goes down into the subconscious of his children, not the traditions of a different family. Now, a good example would be the man is from Syria. He moves to the United States. He learns about certain parts of the life of the United States people, the Constitution, rule of law, some of the Judeo-Christian values, the Enlightenment. He holds on to that culture because he likes that culture, but he also holds on to his culture and traditions from Syria. He chooses the blend that he thinks is right for him and his children, and she gets to teach that to his children. So culture and tradition is something women will have to give up in order to get something greater, which is an emotionally profound and significant relationship. Number 7 is financial control. Financial control, this is a hard one. We've heard so many, your money is our money and my money is my money. Women are very particular about their money. And where relationships fail is a union is supposed to be two people coming together with two sources of income. Stream 1, husband. Stream 2, wife. Both go into a portfolio, which is effectively the institution's revenue. From there, you agree how the expenses will be allocated and distributed and met. And once you've met all the obligations, you have what we call the net profit or the cash flow left. And then both parties can allocate the balance in a manner that they choose. Whether that be, we've spent everything, we've paid the mortgage, we've paid the utility bills, we've paid the car notes, we've paid everything, now we have £10 left. Of the £10 left, he has to decide, because he's the leader. Now, he might be the chief executive officer, and you could be, as a woman, the chief financial officer, but there is still a CEO, which is the role a man plays. He has to decide how the remaining £10 is allocated. He might say, we should save 50%, the remaining 50, 30 go into the joint account, 10 will go into each of our accounts. He gets to choose. So a woman has to be willing to let go of financial control. The money comes through, it's not your money. His money comes through, it's not his money, it's our money. It's part of that union. Money is the root of all evil, where there is the love for that money. The love of money, if I say it more accurately, is the root of all evil. Now, here is what's fascinating. In biblical scriptures, it says you cannot serve God and money together. Money is the root of all evil, not the devil, but money. People's appetite and pursuit for money can be so strong that people will ruin relationships because of a disagreement with regards to money. So from the starting point, there has to be an alignment in perspectives about money. On date number 1, you have to understand what she holds dearly about money, or what you hold dearly about money, and to see whether both can align or whether both are in opposition to each other. If you solve the money problem from a psychological perspective, the relationship will thrive. If one person is too beholden, in other words, your money is your God, it's my money, it's my wealth, you will find that you will struggle as time goes on in that relationship, because you either emasculate him or he will intimidate you to a point of submission. In other words, the man is the breadwinner, for example, in this scenario, and the woman nurtures and looks after the kids. She earns nothing, he makes everything. It is still not his money. This is our money. The £10 he earns goes into the portfolio. It records revenue 1, 10. Revenue 2, 0, because she is not working, she's looking after the kids. Expenses. Both of you agree, not him, not because he works, both of you agree on how the funds are allocated. And then you go through the process, and at the end, £10 cash flow left out of, or in this particular instance, £10 is revenue, £1 cash flow left. Both of you agree on how it's allocated. Half of that 50 pence saving and pence goes into your joint account, 10 pence each to your personal account. It's not for him to dictate to you what you get, just because he is doing the full provision. And when both parties are providing, it's not for both parties to dictate. I have seen so many nonsense done where one party says, well, you make 60,000, I make 70,000. Okay, so here is 20,000 for the joint account and here is 20,000 for the joint account. This 50-50 nonsense is rubbish, which is why it never works. It is the money belonging to the institution of marriage, the union. Everything goes to that union. There is no hoarding or stashing away some money on the side. Here's a good example. This is a true story. I'll change the names so that it doesn't invoke any emotional response. I know someone who is beloved to me. And the couple had been dating for a while. But from the very first time I met them, one of the early statements I heard was from the lady, well, I'm putting money aside as my getaway fund, just in case. And every time we would meet, she would reiterate the fact that she's putting money aside just in case the relationship never works. And we would laugh about it, and I would joke and say, well, you remember, from your mouth to God's ears, whatever you fear, you attract. Whatever you love, you attract. And you're giving out prayers every day, so be careful about what you're saying. You are in a loving relationship, but you keep your subconscious state is motivated by fear that the relationship will fail, and so you want enough money stashed away, as she called it, her getaway fund. Eventually the relationship broke, and obviously she now required that getaway fund. Relationships should not be formed and fashioned on the basis of failure. You should burn your ships and say, I'm all in here. If you have to think about the what ifs, recognize that any decision you make from a place of fear or ignorance. See, ignorance will lead to doubt and worry. Doubt and worry will create a state of fear, which creates a state of anxiety. Anxiety will lead to a form of depression if repressed. Depression will lead to dissolution of the relationship, which will lead to some form of divorce or some form of destruction. And it creates a place where you're not at ease. You're not growing. And if you're not willing to grow, life is not worth living. See, if you're not willing to take a risk, you cannot grow. If you cannot grow, you cannot become your best. If you cannot become your best, then you don't feel fulfilled, or you lose a sense of its significance. It is important to understand how you have to let go and let your heart not be wedded to money or treasures. Focus on the relationships and have trust. Vet properly, choose the right man, and trust. Number 8 is actually giving up your previous comforts. And I'm going to combine so many things in this particular aspect. Comforts refer to family, friends, your single status, your social media, any form of advertising that you provided previously to the world to say you were a lovely person and you should be chosen, or you signal to the world that you want attention. A woman has to be willing to give up some of her comforts, her previous comforts. I talk about the third voice if you have friends who are single and you are in a committed relationship, you should be giving up some of those single friends. Why? Misery loves company. Single women tend to keep other women single. Single men tend to keep other men single. You should look for like-minded people who can nurture your new relational goals. If your goal is to be married and you are already in a relationship, then you should look for people who have similar goals, who want to stay in a relationship and who want to thrive in their relationships. Some single people want to remain single. They want to have fun. They want to have a great time. You cannot have two separate visions as a group. Family, in my opinion, sometimes are the worst to have around you for various reasons. They self-sabotage relationships. Let me say this in a different way. If I were to sit down, and I've done this with people I know, and I ask a simple question. Does your family love you? The answer is always yes. The follow-up question is, your family loves you, but guess what? They do not want you to leave. Because when you leave, you force them to adapt to your absence. And people do not resist change. People resist being changed. Let me say that again. Your family love you, but they do not want you to leave. In order for you to have a successfully, profound, emotionally significant relationship, you are going to have to leave, which is why the father leaves one father and cleaves to a new husband who becomes a new father. You have to leave. And when you are about to leave, you will be met with resistance. Why? They love you, but your absence is forcing them to adapt and change. And people do not resist change. People resist being changed. Family, friends, your single status, your old behaviors of partying and clubbing and all that nonsense, something has to give. To show the man, that you're happy to sacrifice something of a lower nature for something of a higher nature. Social media has to go. The idea that women want to keep their social media accounts while not being social media focused from a business perspective is laughable. Why? Because social media is a way of signaling to the world that you are available. It would be the same as a man who is married to you going up to every woman he sees and saying to her, I'd like to take you out for a meal. In other words, I'd like to take you on a date. That would be disrespectful to you as his wife. Similarly, by having an open social media account where you're posting yourself in a way that is signaling to the opposite sex that you are available. Recognize how a man's mind works. If I were to open a woman's social media account and I saw very attractive photographs and provocative photographs, sexy photographs, and half naked, skimpy clothes, exotic, raunchy poses, seducing stances, the way men calculate in our heads, we are thinking she's available, because such photographs should not be available if she is already in a committed, profound relationship. Why? You've won already. Move on with your life. Now, you can still be on social media, you can still have posts, you can still show posts of you having fun. The key distinction is, are you dependent on the affirmations from strangers, the validations from strangers, the dopamine that comes from the liking and the direct messaging? Are you still public? That's the key word, public. Now, you can have all of that in a private setting amongst selected people who you've chosen, which is fine. But on a public setting, what you're simply saying is like a billboard. You're saying, I am available and I'm open for business. Men will see that she's available and she's open for business. Now, you may not be available, but that would require every advance to be received first and then for it to be turned down. Number 9. Your previous vision and mission. Now, I believe we all have a purpose, men and women. But for you to come into union with someone, to have a profound emotionally significant relationship, you have to submit your vision under his vision. Why? You cannot have two heads. We call that dysfunctional, monster. You need both visions to not to be in opposition to each other. But both visions are not merged, which is why a man's manhood value is dependent on his purpose, and why a woman should choose a man based on whether he is found, whether he is pursuing, or whether he is living a purpose-driven life. Why? He needs to have a vision for where both of you are going to. This whole 50-50 partnership nonsense always ends in disasters. Why? Men are supposed to be servant leaders. We're the ones in front. We're the ones who underguard the property or the foundation of the family. Everything is built on us. The responsibility for success and the responsibility if we fail is on our shoulders, not the woman's. So a woman is willing to submit her vision to his vision. And where her vision opposes his vision, she must be willing to give up her vision and choose his vision. Otherwise, there will never be success. I know I'm referring to the traditional approach to relationships, and I know there is a modern approach to relationship. But Yogi Berra once said that in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. But in practice, there is. Modern dating and relationships is still theory. We've seen about 50 years of that theory, and look at where we are. Feminism birth, this liberal movement, emotionally and sexually rich birth, this fluid movement, which is causing chaos along the way. For people below 40 years, almost 60% of children that are born without fathers. We've created a mess by this progressive nonsense that we call ideology, expression and freedom. Traditional works, continues to work. If you want to play the modern power couple, modern dating approach, great. I would say to you the words used in the movie Taken, when he met the bad guys, and he says, "Can you translate? You know, someone left this message for me, and I recorded it on my answer phone. Can you record? You know, remember this, or I recorded my recorder. Can you, translate this? It's in Albanian. Can you translate this for me?" And he says, "Good luck. You want to do the modern thing? Good luck." Now, number 10, you must be willing to give up your knowledge. This is where I close today's session. Some time ago, someone came up to Bruce Lee, and they were looking to become martial artists. I am a martial artist, and I understand this sentiment very clearly and closely. And they said to Bruce Lee, "You're the greatest. We want to be just like you. We want to be as good as you." So he took them into his dojo, and he said, "I'd like to see you illustrate what you already know." And so they practiced, and they sparred, not with Bruce Lee, just amongst each other. And he was trying to gauge their proficiency. And at the end, he said, he got 2 glasses. One was a clean, clear water, and the other was with Coke. He said, "Let this Coke represent your knowledge and your skill set, and let this clean, clear water represent mine." He said, "You want to have what I have, which is clean. But in order to have what I have, you have to be willing to give up what you have so that I can pour into you. Because it takes a lot more energy and effort to dilute what you already have. I would have to pour so much just to neutralize what you already have. So it's better for you to empty your glass, and then I can start to fill you up with my knowledge. But if you're willing to give up your knowledge for mine, then we can work together. If you're not willing to give up your knowledge for mine, then I cannot help you. As a woman, you have to learn, and you must be willing to give up your knowledge. Now, this does not mean everything you know. It's that need to be right mindset. You have to give up something. The pathology of the modern woman, shame, insult, guilt, the need to be right, and fueled by anger. You have to learn how to let go and let God. Rest in your femininity and your feminine spirit. A man leads by dominant leadership. A woman leads by influence leadership. Men and women influence each other in different ways. Women need to learn how to use the power they already have and understand that you have to give something up. You have to give up some of your knowledge about the world, about how it works. But most importantly, in the relationship, recognizing that it is his vision. You have to recognize the role you play, which is an advisor. You're not driving. The co-pilot and the pilot do not have equal authority. One drives, the other supports. The one who supports is just as capable and just as good as the one who is the lead. But there's an agreement and a protocol. You're going to have to give up your knowledge in order to get his. Your knowledge has got you to where you are, and having found him, his knowledge is what gets you guys to where you want to get to, which is your true north and your destination. Now, I hope these 10 items have been of some value to you.